Hey folks! So in this episode, Cupid's errant arrow, the USS Cerritos is in orbit around Mixtus 3 to help demolish an unstable moon. They're getting help from the USS Vancouver, which parks on top of the Cerritos. I guess the subtext is that the Cerritos still gets no respect. The Vancouver is bigger than the Cerritos, but the bridge looks indistinguishable. That's weird, given that it's not like the show needs to spend a lot of money on a new set. Anyway, the problem both crews are having is that the inhabitants of the planet don't want the moon to be blown up, even though it's about to crash into the planet because they worship it, or their families have lived on it for generations, or they think that the idea that the moon is going to crash is a government-contrived hoax. Also, Boimler has a girlfriend, Barbara Brinson, whom he's been dating for a month. Because Boimler's been conspicuously recording logs about her, Mariner suspects that she's made up, and that she'll probably have to meet her on the holodeck. Boimler says that he doesn't do that kind of thing anymore, implying that maybe he used to have Barclay's problem, or maybe Geordi's problem. Rutherford and Tendi are working on the Cerritos' malfunctioning parts, and they note how run down the ship has gotten. Mariner is shocked to discover that Boimler's girlfriend is real, so eventually begins to suspect that maybe she's secretly an alien who plans to eat him, or maybe lay eggs in him like the Anabaj did a few episodes back. Barb tells an anecdote about having returned from 1920s Chicago, which I guess was intended as a throwback to the original series episode A Piece of the Action, when Kirk and Spock end up on a planet whose society designed itself after a book from Earth that they found called Chicago Mobs of the 20s. Brad seems a little intimidated by Barb's hunky ex-boyfriend Jet, to whom she's still close. She's got to recalibrate something on the Vancouver, so she can't have lunch with Boimler as they had planned. Rutherford and Tendi have to run diagnostics on a simulation mainframe that's used to find alternatives to imploding the moon, and Lieutenant Commander Ron Docent gives them T-88 scanners to work with, about which they're very excited. He even says that whoever finishes first gets to keep a T-88. Boimler laments the fact that Barb's ex-boyfriend is like a Kirk sundae with Trip Tucker sprinkles, which I guess means that Trip Tucker's reputation for being dreamy has survived for the last 219 years. Mariner says she suspects Barb of being a Romulan spy or a salt succubus, I guess like the one in the original series episode The Man Trap that can shapeshift but wants to eat all your body's salt, or one of those sexy people in rompers that murders you just for going on the grass, which I guess is a reference to the folks on Rubicon 3 who don't exactly murder you for going on the grass so much as they execute you for messing up their flowers. Wesley Crusher had to learn that lesson the hard way. Also, Brad Boimler's full name is apparently Bradward. Mariner explains that she's worried because she's seen this kind of thing before, and then there's a flashback to the USS Keto, which looks a lot like the USS Pasteur docked at Deep Space Nine, and Mariner is wearing a First Contact era uniform. One of the other crew members mentions how apparently Data has a twin brother who teamed up with the Borg. Mariner says it's a new thing every week with those guys. Get it? Because it's a weekly TV show? I thought it was kind of odd that they hadn't heard about Lore and the Borg, though, since they're wearing uniforms that weren't issued until a few years after that happened. Anyway, turns out her crewmate Nico was actually a Harvongian shape changer who ate Mariner's friend Angie. Captain Freeman manages to work out compromises to satisfy the folks on Mixtus 3 so they're okay with the moon being demolished. Then there's the guy who points out that the moon blocks pollution on Mixtus 3 from getting to his planet Mixtus 2. Boimler butts in on a briefing Barb is giving about what to do about the moon, and tries to come off as all smooth and whatnot, but is just disruptive and cringy. Mariner plays a loud tone on her tricorder that disrupts the positronic brains of androids, and it doesn't work, so that rules out Barb being an android. Tendi and Rutherford are having fun running diagnostics on their T-88s, and Rutherford fantasizes about the reaction the other folks in engineering on the Cerritos will have when he brings it back to that ship. Tendi is having the same fantasy about bringing the scanner back to sickbay. Mariner has a corkboard full of string and pictures of various aliens, like the salt succubus, a Suliban, what looks like the Vasquez rocks, and some binars for some reason. Also, there's a picture of two Barbs on a transporter pad, which may be a reference to the original series episode The Enemy Within, in which a transporter accident splits Kirk into a wimpy Kirk and an evil Kirk. She also thinks maybe she's an altered Cardassian, I guess like that time that Gul Dukat turns into a Bajoran. To impress Barb, Boimler asks the replicator to make an outfit that's a conglomeration of the outfits of all of the coolest people in Earth's history. And he ends up just looking like he's wearing Marty McFly's clothes from every decade he time traveled to. He replicates a beer to look cool, then spills it on Barb. She gets annoyed at how insecure he's acting. Mariner cuts off some of Barb's hair to scan it, which annoys her even more. Mariner is almost certain Barb is a reptoid because she said Boimler looked sexy, so there's no way she's human. Also, it looked like Tendi was chasing Rutherford around the bar. Boimler brings flowers to the shuttle bay and hears Jet and Barb trying to fit a pipe into an overhead compartment, but Brad thinks he hears something else. Barb yells at him for accusing her of cheating, but assures him that she is not. That's when Mariner sneaks up behind her and pantses her, expecting to find a barbed tail that implants eggs. She doesn't. But on the floor, she finds an exoskeletal husk and thinks Barb is a parasite. Rutherford and Tendi are fighting over who gets to keep their T-88, but Lieutenant Commander Ron Docent says they finished at the exact same time, so they both get to join the crew of the Vancouver. They thought the deal was that they would get to take the T-88s back to the Cerritos, but apparently the deal was that they could only keep them if they joined the Vancouver. Mariner puts on a spacesuit and jumps from the ship onto one of the platforms being used to demolish the moon, because Brad and Barb are on it and she didn't have authorization to beam over. When she gets there, she finds Brad sitting naked at a console. She shows him the parasite husk, but Brad thinks it's fake. The platform starts to fall out of orbit and Brad hits his head. At that moment, Barb walks in and sees the two of them and they start to fight. Tendi and Rutherford want to stay on the Cerritos, but Lieutenant Commander Ron Docent already wrote up the transfer. Apparently he can transfer them against their will because his grandma's neighbor was the Admiral, and the Admiral's a psycho. Tendi kicks his pad out of his hand, and she and Rutherford run off with it. Barb and Mariner are still fighting, and it turns out that Barb is suspicious of Mariner because Mariner and Brad are too different to be friends. Barb thought Mariner was a rogue holodeck character or a Breen infiltrator. Then they both accuse each other of being parasites. Tendi and Rutherford are still running from Ron Docent, and Captain Freeman is still trying to find a way to save Mixtus 3 without killing everyone on Mixtus 2. It turns out that the whole population of Mixtus 2 is just one guy and his wife, so Freeman just decides to implode the moon. Mariner and Barb start laughing over goofy things that Boimler has done, and that stops their fighting. Mariner scans her and discovers that she's not a parasite, but finds out that there's a parasite living in Boimler's head that makes him chemically irresistible to potential mates. It turns out that Ron Docent was trying to swap places with Rutherford and Tendi on the Cerritos because he was desperate to get off of the Vancouver because its missions were too epic for him to handle. Rutherford was recording his confession and uses it to blackmail him into giving them the T-88s. Barb removes Boimler's parasite and breaks up with him to focus on her job and studying the parasite. Tendi reveals to Rutherford that she stole a duffel bag full of T-88s, then Rutherford reveals that he also stole a duffel bag full of them. It seems like this episode had three distinct plots. There was the one with Boimler's girlfriend, the one with Rutherford and Tendi, and the one with the captain trying to figure out how to negotiate with the folks on the planets she's trying to save. It seems as though Rutherford and Tendi are always getting relegated to a B plot, but I always enjoy their B plots, because they're always about how they love doing engineering stuff, even though in this episode they did commit both theft and blackmail. What I also liked about this episode is that Mariner was actually showing concern for Boimler and being protective of him. So yeah, this was a good one.